Well, good afternoon, everyone. Or is it evening yet? Nope, still afternoon. We're glad you were able to join us today on another installment of our boot camp series. Today, we're going to talk about salary negotiation, right, and how important it is. And we got some amazing special guests that I'll introduce in a second. But now I want to talk about my team. I want to introduce my staff here. We got Julie Fielding, who's our assistant director. We have Cody Riffle, who does our employee relations there. Joe Marullo, who's there out on the East Coast. Yeah, he's our logistics and office manager. And our special guest that we have today is Mr. Clay Miller, who is a Michigan football alum. I won't say the year.
Thank you.
Former NFL player and currently a partner at Stone Arch Capital, who will definitely bring some insight on this very, very important piece of the whole hiring process. Along with him, we have Peter Brown, which is a recent Michigan alum, a soccer player that we had here. He's part of our Young Alumni Committee, so he's definitely giving back and helping us with student athletes. He's an associate agile at Bosch, which is important, and that's Bosch North America. So we welcome those two gentlemen, our alum here, to again provide the perspective from a seasoned veteran in the industry and also a new young professional in Peter Brown. And so now, again, this is important, as I said earlier, this is an important part of the entire hiring process. You know, there's going to be a point in that process where you're going to have to negotiate based off what the values and things that you bring to the organization. So, you know, for those who are on here, this is our version of it, right? There's so much information out there, but we just wanted to share what we thought would be important for our student athletes. Julie?
Yeah, so in quarantine, it's a really good time for everybody to continue to build your skill set. And that's something that salary negotiation is. It becomes part of your skill set because as you practice, you get better. You know, in your sport, as you practice, as you're competing at a high level, you're improving and you're getting better in competition. So we wanted to talk about this topic today. Salary.com actually ran a survey on salary negotiation with 18% of people never negotiating a salary in their life. So again, this is an important topic. It's an important conversation to have. They also noted that the reason why those 18% didn't negotiate a salary before was fear. The biggest reason is fear. So we wanted to talk you through some steps, how to prepare, and then answer questions at the end. So preparing to negotiate, you want to be sure you're assessing your bargaining power. So what does that mean? You know, understanding the value that you bring to a company, your education, your unique skill set. How are you different from your peers? What can you contribute to an organization? Why are you different? You want to be sure that you're understanding that before you're delving into a conversation. Organizing your thoughts. You know, when you're talking about money, there can be a lot of things, and more money maybe is at stake. There can be a lot of things running through your mind. So you want to be sure you're organized in what you want to say and what kind of you want to contribute to that conversation. Also understanding your short-term goals. What do those look like? What do your long-term goals look like as well? So making sure you're painting a holistic picture for yourself prior to that negotiation process so you're able to articulate exactly what you want. Do your research. I think this is one of the most important parts of the process. Cody's going to touch on specific resources later on in the presentation, but you want to be sure you're looking into the specific positions, specific industries, you know, considering the geographic location as well. So making sure you're having a strong understanding of what the going market value or the rate is looking like. If you have family members, close friends who are in positions that you're aspiring to be in and you're comfortable asking them some information regarding their compensation package, ask those questions. The more people and the more resources and research you do and have, the more informed you'll be as you go into that salary negotiation. Know the number. Columbia Business School, a group of researchers actually did a whole study on this, and they found that people who have more or ask for more of an exact number tend to get closer to that that salary that they want. So instead of asking for $65,000, asking for $64,750 gets people closer to that final number, because employers tend to think that they've conducted extensive research when they come in with that exact digit. So, know that exact number you're looking for. Don't be afraid to, be a little creative in that spin. But also understanding your own budget. So making sure you have an idea of what your expenses will look like when you graduate or as you navigate a new role, and what that minimum looks like. Typically, when you're negotiating with somebody, it's going to be a little bit of a conversation back and forth. And so maybe highballing a little bit because the employer might counter and come back. So always, maybe pushing that number a little bit as well, knowing that they might counter and come down a little bit on that number. Create a brag sheet. Obviously you'll have your resume to talk about a lot of your accomplishments and things that you've done, but have this for yourself as you're getting into that practice mode. So what have you accomplished? What is your leadership style? Do you have any testimonials or pieces of information from former teammates, former coworkers, people who can attest to what you will contribute and bring to another organization? Make sure you have that and that you have access to that. There's a lot of online resources, free resources that you can tap into, like negotiation preparation charts. So keeping stuff all organized, again, something that I recommend checking out, but making sure you have this information in one place. You always want to bring this conversation back to how you can add value and will add value to that organization. And then practice. That's one of the most important parts. I talked about the biggest reason people don't negotiate is because of fear. If you're not practicing, you're going to be less confident in that delivery. So making sure you're practicing, writing down maybe what you would say, practice in front of a mirror, FaceTime a friend or a teammate, utilize your parents and ask them for feedback. But the more you practice, the easier this will become, and the better, the more, conviction essentially that you'll have during that process. Going into some tips, again, being confident in knowing your worth. So your confidence, and when you enter a room, that'll help set the tone for that conversation. So making sure you're conscious of your body language, you're smiling, you're ready to confidently deliver this pitch or this message as to why your salary should increase or why you have, this additional value you'll be adding to the organization. And that also goes back to knowing your worth. Being positive, when you're asking for money, you're asking for an increase in salary, you want to be sure that you have the organization's best interest in mind as well. So again, what can you be adding? Are you taking on additional have you taken on additional responsibilities? But approaching it in a positive way, not seeming pushy, but positive. And so, saying, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really look forward to working for this organization. I received your offer of $58,000, but was thinking it would be more in the ballpark or range of $65,000, and I'll be contributing my, my drive, my experience, and my, my positivity or something else, adding a few skills and points there. Can we discuss the salary range? So again, but not just saying, hey, can we discuss this? This is lower than what I thought, but approaching it in more of, I'm super excited to work here and to contribute to this team. I really believe in the mission and what you all are doing. And I think here's some ways that I can do that. In turn, this is what I'll be bringing, but I need to come up in that salary a little bit more. Be honest with yourself. When you're talking to HR professionals or employers, they have been doing this a while. They're pretty seasoned in this area. So not only are they comfortable in having these conversations, but they know those rates. So you want to be sure that when you are doing some research and you have this salary aspiration or goal that you want to obtain when you graduate or for your second job out of college, making sure that's also realistic and in align with what the value and what those positions offer. People tend to value financial stability, money, and success. But again, be sure that when you are talking about the next steps or an increase in salary, that you're being honest with yourself during that process. be flexible. You know, some companies, you know, especially in this current climate right now, they might not have the opportunity to offer an increase in salary or even entertain that conversation. But maybe they're not able to come up or bump up in salary after, you know, an initial offer or after a performance review. So you can be a little flexible and creative in this area. You know, there's other parts of compensation packages that employers might be able to come up on or increase. And again, Cody will touch on that a little bit further in the presentation, but be sure that you'll be exhausting all options and not just thinking, okay, my boss said, no, I can't have an increase in salary, or that's not on the table, and just end the conversation. Be sure you have a good understanding of other options as well. And then think about future potential. You know, experience plus time equals opportunity. So maybe something in the short term can't happen, but think about the potential in your future with that company in thinking of future opportunity. So with that, I want to open it up to Clay and Peter to just add any content here and to give your thoughts in this area.
Why don't you jump in, Peter? I'll follow up after you.
Okay, awesome. So just like Mo said at the start, I'm a year out of school, and I wish I had gone through something like this. In my experience, at the end of my senior year, I was kicking for the off season with the football team, trying to get into grad school, and had already accepted a job in Boston doing entry-level sales with Oracle. At the same time, I was interning with Robert Bosch, where I am now. So I had options in terms of what I wanted to do with my future. I didn't want to go to Boston because I wanted to stay closer to my family. So when it got to the time of salary negotiation with my current role, I had a number in my head, and I was fortunate that the company's number was above that. So then my thought process was, well, I'll ask the question to ask the question. My manager said no, and I was okay with that, right? But the things that about doing your research, knowing what the medians are of salaries for your specific role within the industry, I think is so important. Being confident in how you're asking it, like Julie said, being positive in, yes, I'm so appreciative for this opportunity. I thought the number would be closer to here. That's all stuff that I learned the hard way through the awkward conversation of saying, hey, can I have more money? No. Okay. Because it's not an easy conversation, but now come a promotion, come my next job, I know I'm going to be more confident in having that conversation. So my only advice is, these aren't just buzzwords. These aren't just tidbits that Mo, Cody, Julie found off Google. These are real tangible things that I think hold a lot of value in the salary negotiation, and something that I wish I had during my first time.
Okay, that's great. Well, there are three things I guess I would add to what we just talked about. That you got to kind of put into context. One is that a lot of young people coming out of college tend to approach these things sequentially. I think that's actually not a good idea. I think you want to approach them on a broad front. And what I mean by that is that don't just interview or try to get an interview with company A and then see where that goes, and then go to company B and see where that goes, and then go to company C and see where that goes. You want to try to run it on a broad front so that you do have options and you do have flexibility. It'll also give you a better sense of what the market is for what you're trying to sell, meaning yourself. So, if you've got 3 or 4 different companies that you're talking to, it's a lot easier to go back to company A and say, gosh, I really enjoyed this conversation. I really think I could be a great fit for the company, and you get into a negotiation on value and you say, well, I'd really like to work for you, but these guys are offering me $5,000, $10,000 more. And, it's a lot easier to have that conversation that's just say, well, I think I just need 5,000 more. So that's the first thing. The first thing is, make a broad front. A related conversation is about kind of maximizing things that you might value, that they would have the ability to give you. If they're working under a certain type of a budget and there's a number for that job, meaning we're going to pay 75 grand and not $1 more because that's what corporate gave us. There are other areas that you might want to think about. There's benefits. There's 401k plans. There's vacation time. There's perks. Like, do they give you free parking? Do they pay for your cell phone? These things do tend to add up. So when you look at an opportunity, when you fully fully vet what, you may be offered, it's good to take a look at a bunch of different things. There's a very famous book called Getting to Yes by two gentlemen named Fisher and Ury. And those guys actually do a really good job of talking about maximizing the options that they have and trying to make that work. And then I guess the last piece is just don't look at the first year alone. Look at kind of a 3 to 5 year horizon about what you're doing, because on a 3 to 5 year horizon, you may get paid the same monies at companies A and B in year one, but the trajectory in year two with company A might only be an incremental growth. You may give you a 3% raise, where the other companies might say, yeah, if you do well, we give you a 10% raise or a 20% raise, or there's bonuses. So don't just look at year one. Try to get a sense of what the trajectory is from a compensation standpoint over the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Clay, when somebody is pitching you on a salary negotiation or an increase in salary, is there one thing that's you look for that's most important, that you're like, if they do this, this might, give them a better shot, or anything that's in your opinion, that might be most important in the process?
Well, I think just confidence in what you can do. And by that, I mean, you put your money where your mouth is too. So like, we usually, when we hire at Stone Archer within our portfolio company, when we're hiring, whether it be, CEOs or salespeople or whatever it may be, or just people up at my firm in the private equity world, we have a number, generally speaking, about what we're willing to pay. We come to that conversation with a base salary figure that could be between A and B. Where we have flexibility is on performance. And so, you can talk about, look, I know you can only pay me X, but I knock the cover off the ball. Are you willing to consider giving me a bonus of 20% or 30% or even 40% of my salary? And, we can have a conversation. Now, it has to be a little bit of trust on both sides of the equation, but if you really want to go to work for that company and you have a base salary that's kind of within your range, but maybe at the low end, but if you have a confidence in the company and the people you're interviewing with, that they're good people and they're as good as their word, you take a little risk saying, look, if I really do really well, I just want to make sure that you consider, this kind of a bonus structure at the end of the year. And believe it or not, that kind of conversation anchors a dialogue 6 or 12 months later. When you come in at the end of the year and someone says, well, how did I do? And if you say, well, you knocked the cover off the ball, and then you say, yeah, well, am I looking at kind of the higher end of the bonus range? And it's hard for them to say no if they've already told you did a great job. So those are the kind of things, if you're trying to negotiate a little more money or a little more opportunity for yourself, take a bet on yourself from that perspective. When you get older, this isn't really so much for entry level kind of positions, but then you can talk about stock options, and say, so don't give me more base pay, don't even give me more bonus, give me more options, because if the company performs well, I'll do better, and if it doesn't, then I'm willing to take that risk. So those are that's the same general dialogue, just in different phases of your career.
Great, thank you. All right, now I'm gonna kick it over to Cody for the next part of the process.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, both the input from Peter and Clay there really encompasses a lot of the stuff that we'll be talking about, which is great, because you're seeing that the real world examples are going to reflect some of the things that we're telling you here. And the thing to know about situations like this with a salary negotiation is every situation is going to look a little different. One thing that I can kind of relate this to, especially with student athletes, you may already have some experience with this. If you're a scholarship athlete, a lot of times the negotiations you had with the coaching staff is very similar. Having kind of, as Clay had mentioned, having some leverage from other universities. Maybe they were offering you this, and when you come back to another university or the one that you eventually commit to, it's a very similar process. So that's something that, if you're feeling a little discouraged or unsure of what's going to happen, you may already have experience on it. But some of the important things here in terms of the process, as we've talked a little bit about, knowing your potential impact. So being able to measure and speak about the success you've had in previous roles, understanding the value you can bring to an organization. When Clay talked about, having compensation packages based on your performance, maybe that has to do with commission bonuses or end of the year bonuses, things like that. It's important for you to be able to build a narrative throughout the interview process that you're a type of person that sees a standard and measures yourself against it and exceeds that standard, which is the same as selling your skills really without asking it. So, what unique ideas can you bring to the table? So I know that with some of the employers I've talked to, I asked them, what makes a great interview candidate or what makes a great candidate for an opportunity? And they've said, one of the most standout things is the ones who can go and identify some of the major challenges of our organization and then propose solutions. Maybe it's not a super relevant solution in terms of what they're able to do because you don't have the inside information. But the fact that you're a problem solver kind of shows you that the value you're going to bring when you have the information at hand. So never mention your salary in the interview. Yeah, so make your intentions clear, kind of as Julie had mentioned earlier. Make your intentions clear in the interview process of why you want the opportunity. Salary is important, but it's not everything. You want to be able to work at an organization that you're excited about, with people you're excited about. So those are the hard-hitting questions you're going to want to ask as you're talking to them. And obviously finances are going to come up and you're going to talk about that. But let them know the reasons really why you're interested in that specific company. Working with those specific people. They'll ask you, why us? So it's good to have those reasons in your back pocket. Always being prepared for the conversation. You've heard a little bit about this before, but doing your due diligence, doing your research, is probably the most important thing, knowing your market value of your position. But also being prepared in the sense of this is a situation most people entry level have never had before. So having some practice rounds, watching YouTube videos or candid career videos that we send out about this. This is something that you can watch how that goes and see that it's really not as awkward of a situation as maybe people think. It's more a fear of the unknown. But that's actually what I wanted to ask Peter and Clay, both from both sides. They had mentioned, Peter, was this situation the first time you talked salary? Was this something that was a situation like, did it go as you had imagined it would? And also Clay, on your end, how does it kind of seem when you're interviewing a candidate for that role?
I'm not sure I quite fully understand, Cody. I mean, in terms of when we're interviewing people, did they bring it up? Do we bring it up? How do?
How does a situation play out? Is that something that comes up naturally in conversation, or is that something that you guys will bring up and then that kind of starts the process of talking about it?
It kind of depends on the situation. And by that, I mean, when we're hiring at the Stone Arch level, there's a very, I guess, preliminary discussion about, I guess they understand kind of what the range is on the way in the door before I even get to the point of the interview. And really what it's about, the interview is about whether we want that person or that person wants to work for us. So we don't even get into money at that point. And then once there's a determination made that, we want to make the hire or that person's interested, or it's got to be both really, then the conversation becomes, well, here's the offer. And, we'll kind of go from there. And then the negotiation begins a little bit about, gosh, this is what I was making, this is what I need to make, or this is what I would like to make, or how can we make that all work? So from that perspective, the conversation about money doesn't really show up till the end. On the other hand, when we're hiring for executives within our portfolio, we often use some type of a search firm to help us, basically boil the ocean down to, a half dozen candidates that then actually they interview first, then we kind of get to the office. And at that point, they've already kind of effectively boxed the package. In other words, we say, if these people aren't willing to work within this range of compensation, including base, bonus, benefits, and maybe equity and interest in the company, then, let's not waste our time on flying into Minneapolis. So, a lot of that stuff's actually been pre-baked, if you will, from our perspective. So when we get into it again, the conversation is primarily about, do we like you and do you like us? If the chemistry's there, the fit's there, we get excited about the individual, then we do references, and then we get to the point where, all right, let's get down to brass tacks and talk about compensation. And sometimes we get there and sometimes we don't. So does that address your kind of question? Yeah,
just to give an idea of kind of what it looks like from an employer standpoint. I think that's something people don't really understand where about it comes in the conversation. What does that happen with the people I'm going to be working with? Does that happen with a different party associated with the organization? So I think that's a great example. One thing I wanted to mention that it comes up a lot with student athletes when they're applying to opportunities is actually in the application, sometimes it'll ask you what your salary expectations are. And that can be a difficult thing if one, you've never worked before, or two, you just don't know what to tell them. One of the things that is pretty helpful with this is if you give, is to give NA or writing NA or giving an arbitrary number to kind of stand in for that. You don't really want to discuss it on the application. You want to be able to have that conversation in person. So you could mention something like, my employer doesn't allow me to discuss compensation outside of this company, and I don't want to discuss their, I don't want to dismiss their privacy. So that's something you want to kind of be able to have in conversation, because they'll use that a lot of times to understand if you're coming in lower or higher than what they were anticipating. But continuing on, so knowing the competitive rates, kind of as Julie had mentioned, there's some great sites and resources you can use to start to look at what the average proposition value is for the opportunity that you're with. So sites like Glassdoor, PayScale, Salary.com. LinkedIn also has a pretty strong feature for that. You can actually see the salary ranges based off experience level, which is pretty cool. Also, another great resource is ONET Online. If you check that out, it'll give you a very specific breakdown of geographic pay. So an opportunity in California may look very different than something in Mississippi for the exact same position, based upon standard of living costs and really need for what you do as well. So that's something you really want to take a look at and do research ahead of time. That also gives you some meat for what you're going to say for your rationalization as to the number you propose.
I think this goes back to a certain extent, though, too, about understanding the trajectory. I'll give you a great example. So when I came out of law school in Chicago, I was looking at law firms in Chicago and in New York. And the first year, they were roughly within a couple $1,000s of each other. But Chicago is obviously a much cheaper city than New York City was to live in. However, the second year, associates at the law firms were getting paid significantly more in New York, and the gap kept getting bigger and bigger over year. And what you realized was just, as you moved up in those firms in a city like that, the pay competition was forcing them to pay more than they would perhaps in a city like Chicago. Now, at the end of the day, you might have been better off from a standard of living perspective with your first year in Chicago versus your first year in New York. But by years 2 and 3, you were significantly outpacing kind of, if you will, the spread between those two locations. But it is important to think about not only what you're doing, but where you're doing it.
Yeah. And one thing with that is, as I mentioned, ONET Online, it'll actually show you a lot of those things. So it'll show you a position as a financial analyst, 5 years from now, how is the outlook? What is the salary curve? 5 years from now, what is the growth expectancy over the next 10 years? Kind of something you can gauge if you're looking for opportunities. You're not afraid to travel, which is exactly what Clay was saying there. What is your walkaway rate? So what is the lowest you're willing to accept? This might be a good conversation to have if you're doing your own personal budgeting. What are some things that absolutely you have to have? What's your minimum budget, your savings measures, the different things that you want to make sure you retain that you can't leave without. So that's something too that may change depending on the geographic region. If you're able to hedge a few years of lower salary with later in your working career having a higher curve, then that's something that you could keep in mind as well. But knowing your walkaway number is important as well. So, and that also goes with some of the benefits that goes along with it as well. So you'll see some companies may offer a competitively lower salary, but they may offer a double match on your 401k retirement, or offer a much higher vacation or sick leave, as well as other benefits as well. So when taking a look at different offers, you really want to analyze the compensation package and not get just lost in the salary number itself, which is what a lot of entry-level employees tend to do, is just get lost in that number. But the long-term effects of a 30-year compound interest retirement package is going to mean a lot more than making a couple $100 more a month from your salary. So, Julie, you want to head on to the next one?
Yeah, I just have a question really quick for Peter. Peter, when you negotiated your first salary and you kind of got that, no, we can't move on that number. What do you know now that you wish you knew then to be able to kind of either continue that conversation or maybe have that conversation end a little differently?
Yeah, since then, in my own time, I've done a little more research in terms of what an associate typically makes at my company, and then whether it's in the Agile Master role, an engineering role, an HR role, and then also within my own specific role, what's someone making that's 2 levels ahead of me, right? To try and see that projection a little bit. So now, hopefully come in the next year or two, when the conversation of a promotion comes up, I have a better idea of what my colleagues could be making. So I can go into that conversation with maybe a more realistic number in my head in terms of what I should be compensated for.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Julie, I think one other thing that popped into my head during this conversation is you have to understand what your priorities are. If the high salary is your number one priority, then you need to obviously be well spoken on all of these things. But for instance, in my situation, I was okay giving up a little salary to be in a company where I enjoyed the culture, I enjoyed the people I was working with, I enjoyed not only the company culture, but also the culture within my own specific group. So that's a networking conversation, but I think those things fall into negotiation, not only of the salary, but of your position.
For sure. Those are great points. Thank you.
Yeah. The company's considering an investment in you, and also you're considering an investment of your time in them. So really, as Peter had mentioned, looking at the people you're going to be working with, that's an investment in your health and your personal well-being as well. So if you're working with people you're not interested in surrounding yourself with 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day sometimes, that may take more of a toll on you than anything else. But don't be afraid to say no either. It's a two-way conversation. So just because you may get a great offer, if it doesn't feel like a right fit, you're allowed to say no. I think there's some pressure going all the way to the end of a job offer and then turning it down. I mean, it happens, and I'm sure the employer, maybe a little upset about it, but that's something that is natural and is part of the process as well. It's nothing personal; it's just business.
Actually, Cody, I'd interject. I mean, I'd rather have somebody turn it down than take the job and hate the job, and 6 months later,
that's fair.
You got to have a tough conversation because they're not performing or they're not happy. I mean, it's much better for everybody if you've got cold feet. Listen to your heart. Take the right position. Even if it's good money and it's a good job, if it's not a fit, life's too short, and your employer will respect that. Actually,
I think that's
I
a
love
great
that
point.
advice. Yeah, I was going to say.
That's a great point, Clay, because there's an investment on both sides, right? And it costs money to hire people.
It does.
So
but it costs even more. It costs even more money if you've got somebody that you've hired that is going to struggle because they're just not into the job. Because then it's the underperformance versus what you need, or it's the disconnect with people and all the social friction at work that doesn't work. When someone's unhappy, everybody knows it. It's really remarkable in that you can see it, and everybody knows what has to happen. But people the only thing I've ever learned is that when I know somebody's got to go, I used to think, well, I'll give them 6 more months. But I've gotten to the point now when I know somebody's got to go, tomorrow's the right day because you're just 6 months older.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
I think one other thing, and this is maybe more of a comment about maybe your second or third job interview, but never ever badmouth where you've been, because one of the things that we always think of as a big red flag is that ultimately if someone seems like they're running away from a job rather than running to your job, to me that's a big red flag that I don't want to hire that person. I want somebody who's excited about coming to work at Stone Arch or one of our portfolio businesses. I don't want someone who's unhappy where they are and is looking for some place to get out of the rain. So be very careful about how you speak to your prior employee, because they may want to do a reference there as well. And it's always very good to make sure you leave on good terms, as hard as that may be sometimes. If you feel like you've been done wrong, or you've been misrepresented to, or the people that are there aren't they aren't the kind of people you'd like to be around. don't badmouth them. It doesn't serve your purpose. You won't just say, yeah, it's an ill fit. I need to move on. Really excited. Let's talk about this company, not where I've been, where I'm going. Because I think go the other direction and it's an easy slope to slide down. Doesn't serve your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Love that. Like turn it over to Maurice for a few final comments on this.
Always some secrets, some great commentary from Clay and Peter, thank you, and the team. But these are some secrets, some things are out there that could make you uncomfortable if you're not prepared for them. So the first thing is beware of them asking, what do you want in a salary? This is how employers fish for information, and then how they learn about what's included. You need to learn about what's included in the entire package. I think that being uncomfortable, we tend to just throw a number out there, as Cody's mentioning on applications. They'll ask you, what is that number? What did your previous employer pay you? You think that you have to ask. And I think it's important to say, you know what, that's a great question, but let's talk about the company. Let's talk about, again, the benefits package. Let's talk about the culture, the performance expectations, and so on and so forth. So that kind of get you out of there. As Cody mentioned, asking about salary during the interview, that sends a strong message that that's really the only thing that's important to you. And companies want you to be invested in what they're doing. The second thing is let them know that you want to make it work. If the negotiation is not going the way you think it should go, as Julie mentioned earlier, this is an uncomfortable time, right? And you want to get it over with as soon as possible. Just give me a number so I can start working. No, take your time and let them know that you're in it for the long haul, right? You want to work for this company. You're invested in them. The culture matches to what you are bringing there. Always meet the salary response date, right? Sometimes they'll give you a date. They'll offer a salary and they'll say, hey, go think about it for maybe a week or so. I would say that if you don't like the salary, then you want to respond a couple of days early, maybe a day or two early. But you definitely want to meet that salary response date. That shows a lot of things that you're responsible, you're accountable, and having that conversation. So these are some secrets. I remember applying for a position and I heard that first question, what salary do you want? Right? Again, if you're not prepared and haven't done your research, that's a moment where it's like a killer, right? And I wish I would have known this, early in my career of asking the question about the entire package and what it offers. So for here, these secrets, Clay and Peter, I don't know. I know Clay, you probably have heard some of this in your years of doing this, and Peter, I'm sure you will at some point. But Clay, what do you think about these?
Well, I mean, I think you said it well, Maurice. I think there's a couple of things with regard to the response date. I mean, if people give you a drop dead date on your offer, if you've made the decision you want to work with them, don't wait, because they're not usually just interviewing you. Let me just tell you that. I mean, usually they're talking to 3 or 4 people about that position and in earnest. And if they've given an offer, they're going to hold that offer open until 11:59 on the date that they said they would do that. But if you miss that date, people will take that as, okay, they didn't respond, they're not that interested, I'm moving on. And even if you came back after the fact, they may well have said, you know what, we decided to make a different decision. So that's one comment to what you just said. The other thing I want to make everybody understand is that the headhunter, if you ever work through like a headhunter or a search firm, remember, they don't work for you. They work for the company that's going to pay their bill. The standard rate is they get about 30% of the first year's comp for whoever they help place with a given company. So their bread is buttered by the company that's doing the hiring, they're not getting paid anything from you. So headhunters, they try to generate a lot of interest and they try to gather a bunch, because what they get paid is to bring 6 or 10 or 20 people to us and then say, okay, we're going to interview, what do you think of these? And we'll cut that to 10, and then they'll interview those 10 and cut that to 5. And then we'll probably bring in 3. But just understand that the headhunter doesn't work for you. And I think that's important, whether it's internal, meaning it's HR, or whether it's an external search firm that you're working through or with. So those are just 2 other things to think about.
Peter, any last thoughts on this process? Again, as a young professional, these are things that you definitely will be, hopefully we have a long, successful career at Bosch, but, what do you think about these tools?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the tools, my opinion is next level, right? I obviously wish I had this exact same conversation a year ago, pretty much, is when I accepted my job at Bosch. but I mean, the tools are next to none, and what you guys are doing is next to none. I think one thing that I would reiterate is that you need to be happy with the company you're going to, not only the salary, but with the company you're going to. I remember during my recruiting days, one thing Coach Daly said to me was, when it's final season and you're hurt or you're not playing and the weather's cold, you need to make sure you're happy with the school that you chose, right? And I made my decision because I was happy at Michigan. And just like now, I think we're in the very same situation. We're being forced to take vacations, forced to take into 80% work weeks. We're in a global pandemic, forced to work from home, and you need to be happy with the people that you communicate with every day. And I think regardless of at the end of the day, you need to meet your bottom line in order to live and pay the bills. But at that point, then regardless after that, you need to be happy with where you are within your company.
That's a great point.
The last thing I might add is that, particularly for this audience, you guys have something that you can't really appreciate that you're selling that others don't have. You guys are student athletes from the University of Michigan. And I will tell you, throughout my entire career, it has been a tremendous icebreaker on the way in. It also is it's a rebuttable assumption that you're a team player, that you know what it means to work hard, and that you're disciplined. And you know what? If I'm hiring somebody right out of school, or even later in life, that's what people look for. I mean, put aside technical expertise, put aside specialization. If you're a team player, work your butt off, are ready to do what's asked of you, and come every day with a disciplined approach to what you're doing, you're going to set yourself above 90% of the universe. So you've already got that going for you. And when times get difficult, student athletes know what it means to work hard. They've all pushed through the pain. We've all been there. And other people don't know what that means. They think they know what that means, but they don't know what that means. They don't know what it means to have pushed yourself beyond what you thought you could physically do. And that mental discipline and that mental edge puts you in a whole different bucket. And don't ever discount that. And you don't have to overplay that in the interview, but if you play to some of those themes subtly in your interview, people already get it, because they're going to look at your resume, they're going to see where you're from, they're going to see what you've done, and they're going to have that presumption to begin with. And if you play to those strengths in your interview, I think you'll find you do quite well.
I love that. One question that I have for you, Clay. Now in the economic downturn that we are now, understanding that companies have lost money, corporations have lost money, and now when we are now reopening up our country and there's jobs, which means more opportunities for jobs, do you think that when it comes to negotiating, that maybe our students need to be a little more flexible because of what they would have asked for or what the company would have paid them or offered, before this? Now the company is in itself trying to rebound, with cost, but they need to generate manpower. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, what you're asking, is it a buyer's market or is it a seller's market? And right now, I mean, sadly for people graduating from U of M or anywhere, it's a buyer's market, right? So as an employer, you're going to have more choices and probably less pressure on kind of paying a premium to get good people. Now, good people always command a premium. So don't ever think that you're not, somebody who deserves that. But at the same token, there are other things that may be more important than just money right now. I mean, I always look at the first job out of your college career as being one where you get trained. The training, does this company invest in you? Is it going to train you? Is it going to give you skills? And whether those are financial analytics because you went into investment banking, or whether they're engineering skills and project management skills because you go into a company like Bosch or otherwise, these are the things that really you can take with you. They follow you along, and they're more important in your second job, because when you leave that first job, potentially, you've got this skill set, irrespective of where you may have started from a salary standpoint, you've got this skill set in your toolkit to take with you to job number 2 and then job number 3. So at this point, I would say, yes, Maurice, you got to be more flexible. You got to understand it is a buyer's market right now, not a seller's market. So you want to find a good company that you can kind of sign on with that will train you and invest in you over the next 2, 3, 4 years, so that when you come up for air, if you will, after your 3rd or 4th year, either you can stay because you love the place, or you've got this toolkit that you can take on the road to whatever job number 2 looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. So I asked, I sent a message out to everyone on the chat. So does anyone have any questions at this time? Any comments?
Clay and Peter, can you just give student athletes just some advice or words of wisdom right now as they're navigating maybe that job, just general advice, navigating that job internship process, or overcoming the challenge of not being able to compete as two former student athletes? Could you just give some words there?
Peter, why don't you jump in?
I mean, I think in large part I would reiterate what Clay just finished up saying in terms of the value that you hold as a student athlete. I think one thing that I would echo specifically is your ability to manage a workload. I think people, even students that aren't a part of the athletic community, think they're busy, right? And until you add on essentially another job on top of your school load, then you're busy, right? And I think it's the same thing once you get into the workforce. If there's people that you work with that think we have a lot of work and they don't know how to manage it, but you gain those skills throughout your 4 years at a school like Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, that gets back to my comment about discipline. You know how to play hard, but you also know how to work hard, and you know how to work through things, and you just don't waste your time. You become very efficient in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Julia, were you speaking more specifically about getting through the COVID thing, or what were you kind of referring to, Julia?
Yeah, during the COVID thing, their summer plans kind of have changed or shifted. Internships or jobs have been rescinded. So just some words as they're navigating, during the pandemic.
Yeah, well, this is close to home. I actually have a 21-year-old at Michigan who's going to be a senior whose summer internship was just blown up. I think you got to find something to continue to better yourself. Try to see if you can go back and work for that internship virtually, even if it's 10 hours, 15 hours, maybe 20 hours a week, and even if it doesn't pay you a dime, but keep your hand in it, keep your fingers in the pie, so to speak, so you can learn what you can learn, and then try to figure out what else you can do. I mean, maybe it makes sense to go to spring term and take classes to continue to kind of improve yourself from an educational standpoint. If you've always wanted to take more, fill in the blank, whatever it may be, take now maybe that time. If you can, swing it economically, or you can stay on scholarship, or whatever works, maybe that's the answer at this point. Look abroad to, not even abroad like overseas, but I mean, look around and see what other options there might be out there that you could do virtually if you can't do them in person, whether they're in Ann Arbor, and if it's virtually, it could be anywhere. Tap your contacts. There's an old adage that the time to build your network is not when you need it. The time to build your network is before you need it, right? But everybody here's got a network. We've got this tremendous network that Maurice and everybody on this team have helped put together. Don't hesitate to reach out. I probably have had half a dozen conversations in the last several weeks with current and former student athletes at Michigan, trying to say, okay, what am I going to do? Can you help me here? Can you put me in touch with these guys? We're all happy to do that. All of us. I mean, we were all once there. So from that perspective, reach out, ask questions. You never know where something may pop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clay took the words right out of my mouth. I think if I was in the senior shoes this year, I would be trying to utilize that network as much as I can. And even if you think you don't have it, just because you have the honor of wearing the Block M and you're a student athlete, you have it. Whether you know it or not, you still have it. And I think there's hundreds of people just like Clay and I that are waiting and willing to help the seniors.
And that awesome network is the Wolverine Network, right? That's what it is, the Wolverine. I'm gonna put the plug in because it's so important that as Clay and Peter said, network when you don't have to, right, to grow your space. One last point, I just read an article that said for our student athletes who had an internship or job that was rescinded, that employers are asking that they add that rescinded opportunity on their resume, right, in a space saying what they would have been doing, right? And you can put parentheses COVID-19 or whatever, because what I know what employers are going to ask is, what did you do during this time? If you did nothing, right, as we recruit, if you do nothing, you get nothing, right? So if you were active during this time, I networked, I attended webinars, I did some professional development, I got some certifications, you know, I grew my social capital. You know, if you have something to say that you did during this time, I think that's kind of attractive to employers and corporations, because they know that, you know, when times get tough, you know, you're still going to grind. And as Clay's point, as a student athlete, you bring the best every single day. And so you never give up. And so don't forget who you are and what you've done. And this is a great opportunity for you to grow that space. So
Here's another option that I just had a thought about. But, you know, one of the great opportunities of kind of you may have because of this COVID is to do some type of a research project with a professor at the university. I mean, they're always looking for free labor, I promise you, because they need people to help do some of the research and grind it out and do all the site checks. And it's not necessarily glamorous, but if there's a course or if there's a professor that you have a relationship with or a real keen interest in, go to that professor and say, look, I had an internship doing XYZ. I just got blown up. I got time on my hands. I'm fascinated by European history, or I'm fascinated by banking, or I'm fascinated by, you know, doing lab work and, you know, for, you know, this, that, or whatever it may be that gets you going. You know, go to that professor and say, can I work on a research project with you over the summer? Don't need to get paid. Happy to do it. I got plenty of time. I'm fascinated by this area of study. Well, you tell that to a professor and the lights go on, because they love that kind of stuff. So, you know, whether you can get it in the kind of the private market, if you will, out in the world, or whether you can work with a professor at the University of Michigan or frankly, otherwise, you know, that could be an interesting way. But I think to Maurice's point, put something on your resume, have something that says, I didn't stay home and feel sorry for myself when this went down. I went out and continued to better myself. And whether that's going back to school, doing a research project, or finding some place that you can contribute, maybe even volunteer work. I mean, something though that fills the gap on your resume so that it just doesn't look like crickets for the kind of 4 months between May and August of 2020.
great session, team. Again, thank you to our awesome guests. I want to apologize because we have another valuable member of our team. I wasn't looking at him. So Matt Lasker, who does our social media and our graphics, does a phenomenal job. Mac is a recent graduate, so we want to congratulate him on that. And also, we know that he's a gymnast and was the tallest gymnast in the country. So it was amazing and pretty neat having him on part of the team. So I know we're excited about that. So that's our team. Copy down our emails if you have questions and you want to follow up. This will definitely be recorded and will be placed on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it later. We want to say thank you. You know, we'll get through this together. And if you got to go, go blue.